Ooh, welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Those highlights you heard are courtesy of TBS as the New York Rangers defeat the New Jersey Devils 5-1. No, this is not a post-game one podcast, Mollie Walker. This is post-game 1 and 2. The same score, the same domination. Game 2, a slower start than game 1, but by God, the poor fans of New Jersey were ready for their first postseason trip in a while, and they're getting demolished. What's your initial thoughts here, games 1 and 2?
I'm just going to speak this stat into existence with no other context or, thoughts and feelings, just to put it out there for our dear Rangers fans listening. The last time the Rangers had two exact same scores back to back in games 1 and 2 at this sort of margin was 1994, when they beat the Islanders 6-0 in games 1 and 2 of the first round. And well, we all know what happened to that Rangers team at the end of the playoffs. So I think it's a very encouraging sign to see this Rangers team come out this strongly to start the playoffs. It wasn't just the score. It was the way that they built up the score, the way that they limited this high-scoring Devils team to a single goal in each game, one of which was a penalty shot. The Devils have not scored a 5-on-5 goal yet in these first two games. You really cannot ask for more from this Rangers team through the first two games. I don't think anybody really expected it to start this way, but it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of it goes, if the Rangers can keep this up, or if the Devils have a little bit of fight left in them. So we'll see what happens.
All right, Mollie, let's dive more into this series with our Hall of Famer New York Post, Larry Brooks at NYP_Brooksy. We got Mollie's initial thoughts. Larry, 2-0, 2-5-1 wins. Surprised at all? What'd you think?
Surprised at their dominance, yes. Surprised a little bit at how vulnerable the Devils have been the first two games. Experience, I don't know. Goaltending, I think, was probably more relevant, than a lack of experience. But what I've been so impressed with the Rangers is just the way they've played a complete game. Their power play now is dazzling. They are moving the puck, they are feeling it, and they have. It goes back to what they were saying during the season, what we were saying during the season, but it never quite materialized at just how much firepower they have. That Vlad Tarasenko is on the second unit that gets almost no ice time, So, their power play has just been humming. They're playing with authority. They're playing to their game plan. They honestly are. They're not turning the pucks over in the neutral zone. They're not giving New Jersey anything for free. It's as good as this Ranger team has looked all year. And if they're peaking now, they're peaking at the right time.
I feel like a good place to start is the two big name trade deadline acquisitions. Vladimir Tarasenko gets the Rangers on the board both games. Patrick Kane looked like vintage Patrick Kane in game 2. Just your thoughts on the way those two have made their presence felt in these first two games here.
Well, it was only a matter of time for Patrick Kane. Yeah. That's what someone wrote.
As somebody on this show wrote recently.
I think Patrick Kane was a little bit singed by. I think he was getting frustrated, and I think, and he said he had a talk with Gallant prior to game 2, where Gallant encouraged him to be more aggressive, and I think that's. He said to me the other day that he hasn't been deferring, but it's different. Because in Chicago, he was just the guy who had the puck all the time. And now, there are so many players, he said, that, they have their own go-to guys. He was the go-to guy forever. Now there are like 5 go-to guys or 6 go-to guys on this team. But I think he always needed to be a little bit more assertive. And that's what he was in game 2. I mean, he was electric. He was showtime on Thursday night, whereas Tarasenko, I think a couple of days ago or maybe last night, I call him like a stealth bomber. He just materializes out of nowhere, and he plays such an efficient game that he's not a flashy guy, but he's winning battles. He's in the right spot. And he's got that shot. So the two of them, they're different personalities. They're different personalities on the ice. They have different assets, but right now the Rangers are getting the best out of both of them. I mean, Tarasenko pretty consistently. I think, and I think Game 2 is a harbinger of what we can expect. I don't know that Patrick Kane's going to put up 3 points every night. Probably not, but I think he will. I think there will be stretches where he dominates.
I think that's such an interesting storyline for both guys. I mean, I know Patrick Kane had Jonathan Taves with him in Chicago, but you look at a guy like Tarasenko, who he was the guy. He didn't have as great of a supporting cast, and Kane had a little bit more of a supporting cast. But now these two guys who were the number one guys on their respective teams in the West come to the Rangers, and they're suddenly part of this complement of forwards that can all share the burden and all share the responsibility. And I think for a guy like Tarasenko, I think that's why he was able to seamlessly transition in so well, because the pressure must have been lifted off his shoulders.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think what we've seen is two guys who are exemplary teammates. You have to subjugate your ego, and it's easier said than done. Well, you want to win. It's not the easiest thing to do, especially when you're coming from places where you were put on a pedestal, and now you're coming to New York, and it's a little bit different. It's a different lineup. There are different adjustments, but it's a different city with a little bit different expectations, and marquee players don't always succeed when they come over, and certainly not immediately. These two guys have just been perfect complements. Even when Kane was playing average hockey, his presence there never hurt them.
Right.
And they just kept winning.
Right.
And the fact that they're set up the way they are allows Gallant to roll his lines, which he does. They're you've watched them from afar, or I've watched them from afar for many, many, many years, and they're more impressive up close than they were from afar.
I think with Kane, obviously this is not, we haven't seen vintage Patrick Kane this entire time he's been here, but even still, a 2023, hip laboring Patrick Kane is still a major upgrade to the Rangers' top six than anybody else that they could have had in their rotation.
Yeah, and you know what? He came in with such high expectations. I don't remember a guy. I mean, we talked about Jaromir Jagr for a long time before the Rangers got him. He was just out there for a long time, and was his arrival here was delayed because Pittsburgh, out of spite, sent him to Washington instead of New York. There was a connection between the front offices, the Patricks, and they took a worse deal from Washington than they would have gotten the Rangers. So Jagr was a guy who there was a lot of talk about. There had been talk about Gretzky for a while, but we're going back decades now. There was always talk about Lindros when he was sitting out in Philly. But again, we're going back to the late 1990s and the early 2000s. There hasn't been a player who had been projected to be a Ranger for such a long time as Patrick Kane, over the last year and a half. So there was just an immense amount of anticipation. All of the acrobatics the team went through to get the pain that endured playing, a couple of guys
shorthanded,
while. It was to get Patrick Kane. And so people have been a little bit anxious about it, but it's just, it's just another weapon in their arsenal that they can throw out there now. And, again, if Patrick Kane is one of a group, if Vlad Tarasenko is one of a group, then you've got a pretty good group.
I think another underrated layer to this series that's swung in the Rangers' favor is their controlled physicality against the Devils. And I emphasize controlled because it hasn't been crazy. I feel like we've seen teams come out in the playoffs and they're just throwing their body around and it's a little out of control.
Even the Rangers last year,
right
away in the first game against Pittsburgh, Ryan Reeves was delivering big hits. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's definitely a much more controlled. It's intentional. Yeah. You got guys like Vincent Trocheck, who I don't think his mouth is closed once in the first 2 games. Alexis Lafreniere has been a bit of a pest. Braden Schneider dropping the gloves last night. We've seen him that he can hold his own in those types of situations. But how vital has that been to the Rangers game so far here?
Well, I think that it allowed them to take over game 2. I think the Devils came out and played pretty good first period in game 2 again. They get the goal. But early in the second period, it was a 4-on-4, and then the Rangers were shorthanded for I think 48 seconds. And then right off of that, they just started rolling. They had different combinations, a couple of different combinations because of the penalty kill in the 4-on-4. And the first shift was after they killed the penalty, they had Trocheck between Lafreniere and Kakko because Hedl had been up with, I think, Kane and Panarin. And so, they're rolling, and that line, the Trocheck line, just banged away and forechecked. And that initiated about a 3-minute stretch in which they just rolled their lines and they pinned the Devils in, and they were taking they were taking the body, winning battles, eliminating Devils. I think that's where their superior physicality came in, and I agree. It's not for show. They're taking they're taking bodies to win pucks. They're winning battles, and when they can get a down low game going, in addition to the open ice talent rush game they have, they're a very, very difficult team to handle, and that's what they were able to do last night. They've just been they've played 2 not perfect, probably not near perfect. I'm sure they can point to a number of areas where they want to improve. They want to be a little bit tighter, but their checklist must be, their boxes must be filled with checks right now. It just must be. And what they just have to be careful of is being a little bit overconfident now.
Right.
But this is a real professional button-down group. Again, we've talked about how it's really a veteran group now.
It is
experienced. They had 1 year, but it seems like it was like 6 years of worth of experience for them. It seems like they know what they can do. They know what's needed to be done, and they just need to dial in again Saturday night. And I think one of the switches in dynamics is that the Devils now, and it's true, they will have no pressure on them whatsoever. They're basically down. They're down. They're almost counted out, although it's always a mistake to count teams out. But they have no, they have no pressure. They don't have to worry about their playing in front of their fans. Whereas what the Rangers, I think, have to be careful of is not trying to put on a show, because they're just stick to it. Stick to the program. Be disciplined, manage the puck well, all those cliches, but just don't come out and start going east-west because you want to put on a show. And that's something the Ranger teams of the of the the tens, they were guilty of that a lot of time in the playoffs, and that's kind of what held them back at times, because they would play well on the road, and then they'd come home and they'd want to put on a show. You'd have Zuccarello and Brassard, they'd want to put on a show, or Nash and Stepan, whatever it was. So that's what the Rangers have to be careful of coming back home, just to stay the course, play their game, grind the Devils down. I imagine the Devils will switch goaltenders.
Yeah.
Vanacek just hasn't been good enough.
No.
He just hasn't been good enough when they needed him. I think Schmid is the most talented goaltender. So I would be surprised. I thought they really should have made the move for game 2. But I get it. Vanacek.
Yeah, this is the guy that's backstopped them all season.
Right. You don't want to disrespect him, but
right.
In the playoffs, you've got to move quickly.
Yeah.
I think, and you balance.
Gets late early.
It's late early. I know Luke Hughes only played a game or 2.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to do that.
You saw how poorly they've been on their power. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the lineup Saturday. So there'll be a couple of changes. Again, the Devils now will say, well, everybody's counting us out, just like at the start of the season.
Right.
How teams use
that,
whatever they have, they use, and this is going to be all nobody thinks we can win, but remember back in October.
That's what Lindy Ruff said last night. Lindy Ruff explicitly said, we talked about our start to the season, how they went 0-2 when all the fans were calling for Lindy's job. Like that was a low point of the season, and then they went on and turned on the Jets and just went on this absolute tear, as Jack Hughes called it.
Right. So they'll be unencumbered Saturday, and the Rangers will have we'll have a little bit on them. People are expecting them to win.
Oh yeah.
It'll be a party. But they have to be careful not to get caught up in the atmosphere, which I'm sure will be wild Saturday night.
Chris Kreider, the Rangers' longest tenured player and now all-time leading playoff scorer. Yeah. One of my favorite articles and conversations that you've ever had with Chris Kreider, just talking about how he plays moneyball now. And those 2 power play tip-in goals in game 2 were the definition of moneyball. What are you seeing from Chris Kreider?
I'm seeing the shots that went in last year where he scored 52, but didn't go in this year when he scored 36 going in. But he has perfected it. It's an art form around the net. He is as sharp on his game as I've seen. He's that power play is just confident. It is just confident. And the Devils just haven't done a good enough job either of marking him. Honestly, he's kind of there.
Yeah.
I would expect a little bit better effort on the Devils penalty kill on Saturday night. But yeah, this is what Chris does. I mean, Chris is a studious guy, and he understands the percentages. That if you get to the right spot at the right time, the puck's going to go in X amount of times. His shooting percentage on the power play this year was ludicrously low. It was extremely high last year, but it was ludicrously low this year. I mean, he even going back to opening night against Tampa, he could have had 5 goals. He would have had 5 goals last year. He had 1. So, but he stuck with it. He just stuck with it and stuck with it. He's from back in 2012, starting back in 2012, he's been a pretty good big game player. He's a real good Ranger. I mean, he really is. He's becoming an all-time Ranger. And of course, credit to him for having the franchise record at 38 playoff goals now, right? 38.
I think so. 30. Yeah.
38,
it was 36 after game 1. So 38. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it also, that 38 goals would be the leader for,
Yeah.
for an original 6 team.
Oh, it's okay. We don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, no, but you know, because
But you do.
those guys just didn't play, you know, like,
Right.
you know, Gilbert, Rattel, they just didn't play um as many playoff games as you needed. And of course, you know, back there were 2 rounds, and then 3, and so but you know, Kreider, I didn't get over to him after the game last night until his you know, scrum had ended, and I just chatted with him for a second about their physicality and about how they took over the game. So I didn't hear him talk about his goals, but I'm sure he deflected. I'm sure he
No.
deflected
Talk
credit
about his
and wouldn't,
goals.
and wouldn't talk. You know, and wouldn't talk.
Chris Kreider's not talking about his goals in
Yeah,
game 2 of the first
no,
round of the playoffs. He's
no,
not talking about his goals on game 1 of the regular season either.
no. So you know, right now they have, you know, a weapon on another weapon on their power play who's looking.
I'm curious from both of you, what was the atmosphere in the past? You know, Larry said, you said it was, you know, all Ranger fans. Was it 60-40 Devils, 70-30? What was it like?
60-40 sounds about right.
I would say
In the Devils.
60, 65, and of course when
Yeah.
the Rangers go ahead, it you know, then I mean,
Oh,
last night in the third period, it was all, you know, you could have closed your eyes, you would have thought you were at the Garden. It was
yeah.
as I had talked about, I think last week, it was like 2008 when you know, the Rangers went in there, won all three games of the Rock, and honestly, it sounded like MSG West.
Mm.
And that's what it sounded like in the third period of each of the first 2 games. But last night, game 2, even more. And you know,
Yeah.
last night the Ranger fans were partying.
Yeah.
You know,
Devils fans have been heading for the exits
the Devils
a little
fans,
bit early.
they're great. You know, listen, you know, it's hard when your team is getting battered, you know,
Yeah.
and being battered by the team across the river that you hate. You know, it's you know, it's tough, but it was a great atmosphere. Not because of the Ranger fans, because, you know, because of the Devils fans. I mean, you know, the Devils fans were hyped. They you know, they were loud. They drowned out the Ranger fans in the first period of both games. But as you know, as the fate was being decided, you know, it was, you know, it was like you were on the other side of the river. But it was terrific, and I expect there'll be Devils fans at the Garden on Saturday. You know, they actually travel pretty well, and so it'll you know, it's been a terrific atmosphere. The games haven't been as competitive, but the Rangers are okay with that.
When the Rangers do come home and, you know, for game 3, in your mind at least, does this series feel like it's over? Like, is this pretty much
Should be
a must win?
It should be.
No, I mean, it should be. I mean, you know, the Rangers should, you know, the Rangers are in control, and you know, there's it's on them to keep control. But you know, if they think it's over, then it won't be. But again, they're you know, they're an experienced group now.
Yeah, they've been on both sides of 2-0 series lead, and deficit, and 3-1 deficit just last season. So if anybody knows that it's not over, it's them. And I asked Trouba last night if they're going to rely on that sort of playoff experience, and he agreed. You know, they've been on both sides of this equation before, so they know how quickly it can change. And I feel like that's going to help them a lot. I do.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they'll apply their experience from last year. Remember, you know, when they lost the first 2 in Carolina last year, a lot of people thought it was
that was it.
And you know, Carolina was total command, and they weren't. So things do change in a hurry. You know, they can change in a hurry if you deviate from you know, from your plan, if you get carried away, if you know, if you're distracted. But I don't listen, the Devils may play a terrific game tomorrow night. The goaltender may make 39 saves. Jack Hughes may explode. Timo Meyer, may put one in. Palat. It's not over, but the Rangers are in, are in position to hammer, to just hammer away at them.
It's not over until John Brancy sings.
It's true. Actually, he'll be on the show soon. Actually, Jake.
That's right, John.
I've got one more actually. So, in my mind, at least, the Rangers, the series was supposed to be a relatively close one. Closer, kind of more like the Hurricanes and the Islanders series. I feel like closer games, but as of right now, the Rangers seem to be clicking. Is this the best that this team can possibly play, or do you see them possibly taking it up to another level? Because 5-1 victories back-to-back nights against a very good Devils team. It seems like this is as elite as they can be, but is there another level?
Yeah. There is another level, and there's going to have to be another level. You have to improve as the playoffs go on. Your second round is going to be tougher than your first round. Your third round is going to be tougher than the second, and the finals are going to be tougher than that. So, I think this is the best we've seen from the Rangers so far, but it can't be their best. More is going to be needed. Listen, 1994, they beat the Islanders 6-0, 6-0. They swept in the first round, but they needed to elevate their game in order to get by New Jersey in the conference finals that year. Their first round play wouldn't have been sufficient. They're going to be challenged more, and they'll be challenged more, I think, Saturday in Game 3. The Devils are a proud group, and again, they didn't come up with, what do they have, 112 points for nothing. They're a good team, and they still have all of the assets that we talked about before the series right now. It's been tough for them. But I don't think Jack Hughes is going to go into a shell Saturday night, and the Rangers have to be prepared for that. I think everybody has more to give, and it'll be required if they're going to get through this.
Larry Brooks, read his coverage of the New York Rangers in the New York Post and nypost.com. Larry, we will talk to you after Game 4. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All righty. Great stuff there from our New York Post mastermind, Larry Brooks. That wraps up episode 122 of Up in the Blue Seats, our Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Thanks to Andrew Hartz for helping me produce the show. And make sure you watch this show on the New York Post Sports YouTube page. Find that playlist and give us a thumbs up. Comment below. What are you thinking about the Rangers right now? Is this going to be over in 4, 5, 6? Are we going to have a Rangers in 4 meme like the Suns in 4 guy coming up? Let us know how many games you think this goes, or do the Rangers find a way to blow this and the Devils win? Let's not even utter those words into the atmosphere right now. Make sure you subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get podcasts, and follow Mollie on Twitter at Mollie Walker. That's 2 E's, 2 R's, and follow me at Jake Brown Radio. Mollie, unfortunately, on the other side of town, the Islanders are down 2-0, and your dream local runaround could be over pretty quickly, and you might be making friends with people in Raleigh again.
Yeah, it's not going too well for the other tri-state team, but that's just kind of how the playoffs go. But we could go to Raleigh. There's the Boxcar Arcade. I'll hit that and I'll be happy, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, you need like your baby picture on the wall there at the Boxcar Arcade. The amount of times you've been going to Raleigh each year for playoffs, regular season, both teams. So we'll see how that plays out. Well, we will be back on Tuesday after Game 4. Maybe it's the end of the series. So I've talked with John Brancy, the national anthem singer, aka my better looking doppelganger. And he is down to come on the show. So at some point during this postseason run, we will hear from the fine tunes of our favorite opera singer, John Brancy. And we'll be back on Tuesday. So thanks, everybody, for listening to Up in the Blue Seats. And we'll talk to you after Game 4.